He was just an ordinary soldier, until one moment on the battlefield changed the course of history forever. The ambush that changed everything. June 14, 1941. Outskirts of Brest-Litovsk, eastern Poland, rain hammered the treetops like 1,000 tiny drums as Private Alexander Kroll, a 23-year-old Polish conscript serving under the newly formed Polish Resistance Liaison Units, crawled through a ditch slick with mud. Soviet and German forces were locked in a tense pre-invasion quiet, but along this stretch of pine forest, the silence felt different, charged, restless, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. A faint rumble echoed in the distance. Not thunder. Engines. Kroll's hand tightened around the worn wooden stock of his carabiner 98K, ironically issued by the Germans months before he deserted their forced labor battalion. He raised himself just enough to peer over the lip of the ditch. Through the clearing, a convoy emerged. 3 Opel Blitz trucks, 1 Kfz, 251 half-track, and a staff car draped with the black and silver insignia of the Wehrmacht High Command. He felt his pulse climb. "Command vehicle here?" he muttered under his breath. Something wasn't right. High-level German officers didn't travel this close to the disputed boundary without heavy escort. The convoy was moving fast, splashing through puddles, the engines strained and overworked, as if fleeing something. Kroll glanced back at the 2 resistance fighters waiting behind him. Sergeant Marek Rona and radio operator Ulik Wysocki, barely 19. Rona whispered, "You see it too?" Kroll nodded. "They're running. From what? I don't know. But someone important is in that car." A split-second decision, one that would shape the course of his life, formed in his mind. They had 1 anti-tank rifle, 1 chance. "Prepare the WWII 35, Kroll ordered quietly. Wysocki's eyes widened. "You want to stop the staff car? Alex, that's suicide. Look at them. There's at least 20 soldiers." But Kroll wasn't listening to fear. Something deeper, instinctive, pulled at him. If that's a high-ranking officer, he's carrying orders, plans, something valuable. And in this war, information could shift entire front lines. The resistance team positioned themselves at the edge of the tree line, concealed by ferns in the stifling summer mist. The ground trembled as the convoy approached. "Now," Kroll whispered. The crack of the WS-35 split the air. The bullet punched through the front wheel of the staff car, sending it skidding sideways into a cluster of birch trees. Soldiers shouted, scrambling for cover. Gunfire erupted in both directions. Kroll sprinted forward before the Germans could regroup, bullets whizzing past his ears. He reached the wrecked car, smashed the rear door open, and yanked out a dazed officer pinned under scattered documents. A colonel. Colonel Reinhard Keller, strategic logistics planner for Army Group Center. And on the muddy ground beside him, sprawled across the forest floor, lay a briefcase stamped with the double-headed eagle of the Reich. Kroll grabbed it instinctively. Behind him, Rona shouted, "Alex, move!" The forest exploded with gunfire. Pine bark splintered. A grenade detonated somewhere to the right. Kroll dragged Keller into the ditch, pressing his rifle to the colonel's chest. "Quiet," he hissed, "or you die right here." Keller, pale and trembling, raised his hands. "Please, don't shoot. I can negotiate." But Kroll had no interest in negotiations. He motioned for his team to fall back into the woods. They weaved through dense undergrowth, zigzagging through gullies and ravines as German soldiers fanned out behind them. Finally, after nearly 30 minutes of running, they slid behind the ruined foundation of an abandoned farmhouse. Wysocki collapsed to his knees, gasping. "We're dead! They'll sweep the entire forest." "We're not dead," Kroll said. He knelt, snapped open the briefcase, and the breath froze in his lungs. Inside were not maps of the region, not troop rosters, not fuel logs. They were looking at the preliminary operational framework for Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union set to begin within days. Kroll stared at the pages, his fingers shaking, understanding instantly the magnitude of what he had stumbled into. This wasn't just intelligence. This was the blueprint for the largest invasion in human history. He looked up at the colonel, who stared back with a mixture of terror and shame. "You weren't fleeing from us. Kroll said quietly. You were fleeing from your own army. Keller swallowed hard. They found out I warned the Soviets through intermediaries. They want me silenced. The woods around them rumbled again, distant German voices moving closer. Rona whispered, Alex, what do we do? Kroll closed the briefcase, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and took a deep, steadying breath. We deliver this, he said, to London, to Moscow, to anyone who can stop what's coming. Do you know what you're suggesting? Rona asked. Yes. He tightened his grip on the case. And if we fail, millions will die. The colonel looked at him with a strange, almost pleading expression. You don't understand, Keller whispered. These plans, they were only the beginning. Kroll didn't respond. He only stood, wiped the rain from his brow, and motioned for the others to move. The moment he took his first step toward the east, Private Alexander Kroll, unknown, unremarkable, overlooked, began a journey that would make him one of the most consequential, yet least recognized figures of the Second World War. The decision that altered the war. June 14th, 1941. Same day, deep inside the WWII forest. Night had begun its slow descent, bleeding orange across the horizon as the last rays of sunlight flickered through towering pines. The forest floor crackled underfoot, damp from the afternoon rain, every sound amplified by the tension hanging over the small resistance group. Kroll moved with deliberate precision, the briefcase pressed against his chest beneath his coat. Each step felt heavier, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of what he carried. Behind him, Sergeant Rona kept the captured Colonel Keller at gunpoint, while young Wysocki scanned the tree line with jittery eyes. A distant engine growled again in the west. They're still hunting us, Wysocki whispered. Rona grunted. They won't stop, not until they put a bullet in Keller's head. Kroll didn't turn back. Then we make sure they don't catch us. He paused atop a ridge overlooking a marshy clearing. In the fading light, thin mist curled upward, like smoke from invisible fires, swallowing the landscape in a ghostly gray. We camp here, Kroll said. Wysocki shook his head frantically. You're serious? If they track us? They won't, Kroll replied. This marsh confuses scent trails. Even dogs hesitate here. The colonel exhaled shakily. You know this terrain well. Kroll finally turned to face him. I was born 50 kilometers from here. My father hunted these forests before the Germans took everything. He took a step closer. Now tell me what else is in that briefcase. Keller hesitated, eyes flicking between the three men. Then slowly, his shoulders sagged. The documents you saw, they're the core. But there are additional notes, internal memos. They outline logistical weaknesses, fuel dependencies, rail vulnerabilities, precise timetables. He lowered his voice. Information that could delay the invasion, perhaps even cripple it. Rona's breath caught. Cripple Barbarossa? That's impossible. Keller shook his head. Not with tanks, not with armies. He looked directly at Kroll. But with knowledge? Yes. The forest fell into a still, heavy silence. For the first time, Kroll allowed himself to imagine it, intercepting the invasion before it began, saving towns, villages, entire nations from the tidal wave of destruction waiting just days away. But another thought surfaced. If this gets out, he murmured, everyone will want it. London, Moscow, the resistance, even factions inside the German high command. And each will use it differently, Keller warned. One path leads to millions of lives saved, another to chaos. Wysocki swallowed. So what's the plan? Kroll's eyes drifted eastward, toward the faint glow of distant fires where Soviet border posts burned quietly under German sabotage teams. Storm clouds gathered again, rumbling low. We split, Kroll said. Rona looked stunned. Split? Alex, that's suicide. It's the only way. Kroll crouched and drew a rough line in the dirt. You take Keller north to the partisan link near Hainovka. They can smuggle him to Moscow. He knows the details, every date, every supply line. Rona narrowed his eyes. And you? Kroll tapped the briefcase. I take this west, to the British. They need written proof. Churchill won't act on rumors. Wysocki stared at him, horrified. You're going alone? across occupied territory? Alex, you won't make it past the first checkpoint. Perhaps. Kroll stood again, tightening the strap of his rifle. But if both routes succeed, we change history. The forest wind howled through the trees, flinging needles in swirling patterns. Something primal in the air seemed to respond to his words. Rona stepped forward. I won't let you walk into this alone. Kroll placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You have the more important mission. Keep Keller alive. If they kill him, half this intelligence dies with him. Keller looked away ashamed. You're risking everything for a traitor. Kroll shook his head. I'm risking everything to stop a slaughter. Don't confuse the two. A moment passed, then another. Finally, Rona nodded once. Slow, heavy, unwilling. Then we move at dawn. But dawn never truly came. June 15th, 1941. 0312 a.m. Kroll awoke to the faint scent of smoke. Not campfire smoke. Burning wood. Burning rubber. He stood instantly, rifle raised. Through the trees, a faint orange shimmer pulsed. Too steady. Too high. Headlights. He hissed under his breath. Up! Now! Rona jolted awake, dragging Keller to his feet. Wisaki grabbed the radio set, slipping the headset around his neck. Kroll knelt beside the boy. Send this one message. Package splintering. East and west routes. High risk, high value. Then destroy the radio. Wisaki nodded, already twisting the dials. The engines grew louder, closer. German voices, sharp, commanding, echoed across the marsh. Kroll looked at Rona. This is where we split. Rona swallowed hard. Alex, go, Kroll whispered. And like shadows breaking apart, the small group vanished into the forest, one heading north with a reluctant German colonel, the other moving west with the most valuable documents in Europe. Kroll ran, branches whipping at his face, the briefcase striking his ribs with every stride. Behind him, German soldiers burst into the clearing, flashlights slicing through darkness like hunting knives. A single thought drove him onward. If I fall, history falls with me. He crossed a ravine, slid down a mud bank, and plunged into freezing water, his breath ripped away by the shock. He fought the current, emerging on the far side, gasping, shivering, but alive. Ahead, the forest thinned. A faint dirt road stretched under moonlight, a path west, to Warsaw, to smuggler networks, to the underground that could take him to London. Kroll took one final look back at the burning tree line. Then he stepped onto the road alone, soaked, exhausted, but carrying the one weapon capable of altering the largest military invasion in history. The mission that made history, June 17, 1941. Near Warsaw, Poland. The city was eerily quiet, its streets slick with early morning rain. Shadows stretched long between shuttered windows, and the occasional clang of a distant tram echoed like a drumbeat in the mist. Kroll moved cautiously, his soaked uniform sticking to his body, the briefcase wrapped tightly beneath a tattered coat. Every alleyway, every corner, was a potential ambush. The Gestapo were relentless, and the rumors of random street sweeps made Warsaw a minefield. He ducked into the entrance of an abandoned tenement, sliding the heavy door closed behind him. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and fear. Rats scuttled across the floorboards as he crouched against a wall, his eyes scanning the room. Shadows danced under the faint glow of a single hanging bulb. The underground contacts were late. The clock ticked, relentless and mocking. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, a soft tap on the wall caught his attention. Kroll? A hushed voice whispered. Yes, Kroll replied, rising to meet the figure emerging from the darkness. A man in his 40s, wearing a patched coat, eyes sharp and wary. He introduced himself as Janusz Zaleski, a liaison to the Polish underground and a trusted courier to the Allies. Do you have it? Zaleski asked, glancing nervously at the door. Kroll nodded, lifting the briefcase slightly. Everything. Operation Barbarossa. Timetables, logistics, supply lines. The whole blueprint. Zaleski's eyes widened. If this reaches London intact, Alex, do you know what this means? Millions of lives, entire divisions, could be redirected, Delayed. Stopped. Kroll nodded silently. The weight of the documents pressed harder against him than the wet coat or the fatigue. It was not just paper, it was the fate of nations. Good. We have a route, Zaleski continued. By tonight, you'll be on a train heading west, through Krakow, then via smugglers to the border. From there, the British intelligence network will handle it. Kroll exhaled sharply. And the Germans. They will never know you carried it, Zaleski said. You've done your part. Now it's up to others. The hours blurred. Kroll remained in the shadows, listening as the city stirred to life outside. Soldiers marched in tight formation along distant streets, unaware that their meticulously planned invasion was about to be disrupted by the actions of one young soldier. June 18, 1941. On the train to Krakow. Kroll sat in a dimly lit compartment, the briefcase hidden beneath his legs. The rhythmic clatter of the train over tracks was a lullaby and a warning all at once. Every station, every checkpoint was a test of nerve. Guards with German-issued rifles scrutinized every passenger. He held his breath, feigning fatigue, his mind racing through escape strategies if discovered. Hours passed. Each mile westward felt like a lifetime. And then at a minor station outside Krakow, a patrol halted the train. A small group of Gestapo officers boarded, questioning passengers with a practiced suspicion. Kroll's heart pounded against his ribcage. He met their gaze calmly, letting exhaustion paint his expression. One officer approached, studying him. "Where are you headed, soldier?" the officer demanded. Kroll's voice was steady. "To see family. I've been reassigned west." He gestured to his pack. "Orders just came through." The officer's eyes narrowed, but finally, with a dismissive wave, he moved on. Kroll exhaled silently, gripping the briefcase tighter. Night fell again, and the train moved steadily west. In the compartment, he allowed himself a brief moment to look at the papers, the coordinates, the schedules, the vulnerabilities of German supply lines. He realized something monumental. In the hands of British intelligence, this information could alter the opening of the Eastern Front. The journey was perilous. Sabotaged tracks, near misses with patrols, and the constant fear of betrayal tested his resolve. Each encounter, each decision, weighed on him. And yet he pressed on, driven by a singular focus. The knowledge in that briefcase was more powerful than any gun, more decisive than any tank. By the third day, Kroll reached a safe house near the western border. He was met by a British liaison, Captain Edward Hastings, a sharp-eyed intelligence officer embedded in the Polish resistance. Without a word, Kroll handed over the briefcase. Hastings opened it, scanning the documents with widening eyes. "My God," Hastings muttered. "If this is accurate, this changes everything." Kroll nodded, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. He had no illusions of fame or recognition. His role was done, and yet the war's outcome, the countless lives spared, rested partially on his courage and intuition. That night, as he watched Hastings coordinate the transmission of the intelligence to London, Kroll allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The forest ambush, the split path, the treacherous journey across occupied Poland, all of it had led to this moment. Private Alexander Kroll, an ordinary soldier in the eyes of many, had become a pivotal figure in World War II. Not through rank, not through brute force, but through audacity, instinct, and an unwavering commitment to act when it mattered most. The intelligence he delivered delayed critical German advances, giving Soviet forces precious days to prepare. The decisions he made, the risks he took, quietly shaped strategies and altered the war's course, an invisible hand guiding history from the shadows. As dawn broke over the safe house, Kroll stood by the window, rain streaking the glass. He would never see the battlefield glory of generals or the headlines of newspapers. But the impact of his actions reverberated across Europe and continues to echo in modern military strategy, a testament to the extraordinary power of courage and decisiveness in the darkest hours of war.